Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Ritesh Mishra. I'm a Cisco voice engineer. Today we are going to look at ISDN call flow, and we will be analyzing sample output of debug ISDN Q931. In the last video we learned about uh, uh, how to troubleshoot ISDN layer 1 and layer 2 and all kind of PRI troubleshooting. Today we'll be looking at the debug analysis. But before going to debug analysis of PRI, we should be understanding the call flow. What are the messages that gets exchanged between our Cisco router and the service provider when we have a PRI line? So if you look at the screen, this is the basic call flow between a Cisco router and service provider when we have a PRI. So let's get started. So let's let's take an example. Your layer 1 is active, layer 2 is multiple frame established, but you're trying to make a call and calls are getting disconnected, and that too it's an external call, maybe an external incoming or external outgoing calls which are getting disconnected. So what are the messages that will be exchanged between our Cisco router and a service provider? So let's take an example. We have a Cisco router and a PRI connection between with the service provider. So let's take an example if it's an outgoing call. If it's an outgoing call, then the first message that will be exchanged between the router and service provider will be a setup message, and it will be towards the direction of provider. Our router will be sending this ISDN setup message. So our router will be sending this ISDN setup message to the provider. This will be an ISDN. We'll see what this ISDN setup message contains. It has calling number, plan and type of calling number. We will be using a call reference, which is there in the setup message, which will be a unique identifier for PRI debugs. We will also have the channel number. All those informations will be available in a setup message. We'll see what informations are there in the setup message when we will analyze the debugs. So first, let's understand the call flow. So for outgoing call, our Cisco router will be sending ISDN setup message to the provider. A provider will be responding with call proceeding, ISDN call proceeding. And again, it will be responding with call alerting. So if you guys understand SIP, which we will be covering in future videos, setup can be considered as an invite, a call proceeding as a trying, 100 trying, alerting as an 180 ringing, and then provider will be responding with 200 OK. So in ISDN, it's connect. So it's setup from Cisco router to the provider. Provider should respond with a call proceeding, call alerting, and a connect. And sometime you might see a connect ACK from the calling party side. Connect ACK from calling party side, and then an RTP. So the call establishes. And then whosoever disconnects the call will send a disconnect to the other party. Suppose in our case, the calling party disconnects the call, that means our router would be sending ISDN disconnect to the provider. A disconnect to the provider. So this is the PRI call flow. And this is for outgoing call. Remember one thing, in PRI, the message direction will change with the call direction. So if it's an outgoing call, router, that means the call was initiated by the IP phone, which is in our network infrastructure. So our router will be sending a setup message to the provider. We are not covering the IP leg in this video. We'll be covering the IP leg and we'll be dealing with MGCP, SIP, and H323 in the future videos. For now, we are just concentrating on the TDM leg and the PRI. So for outgoing call, when call is initiated by a IP phone, our router will be sending ISDN setup to the provider. What in case of incoming call? In case of incoming call, the message direction will reverse. So when I say incoming call, the call is coming from external source, PSTN service provider or ITSP, to our uh, our organization's infrastructure. So it will be first landing on the voice gateway, then going to the call manager, and then to the IP phone in a simple call flow. So in case of incoming call, when you have a Cisco voice router having a PRI connectivity to the provider, in this case, your incoming call will come with a setup ISDN setup message first. It will be from provider to the Cisco router. Then our Cisco router will be responding with call proceeding. Same way, our Cisco router will respond with call alerting. And then a connect. So setup will contain all the information sent by the provider, called calling number, plan and type of call, and calling number, channel information, everything will be there in the setup message. Cisco router will respond with a call proceed, which means we're trying to set up the call, it's in progress. Call alerting means the called party. In case of incoming call coming from service provider, our called party is the IP phone. This here will be our called party somewhere. So our call, I'm not dealing with the IP phone leg as mentioned earlier. So we are only looking at the TDM leg, the PRI call flow as of now. So call alerting means the called party, which is in case of incoming call is IP phone, is started to ring, and that's when call alerting is sent to the calling party. Connect, that means the called party has picked up the phone, and it is ready to start a two-way audio communication. So it is sent to the provider, a PSTN. That called party has picked up the phone. It has pressed yes, just like in a mobile phone you guys do. So and we might be receiving a connect ACK from provider. Right. So this is the call flow of call flow in the PRI between a Cisco router and provider. So the message direction reverse, changes with the call direction actually. So similar here in case of outgoing call, when we are sending the setup and receiving a call proceed, that means the called party, which in case of outgoing call is provider, this is the called party, right? So here it will be the called party somewhere at the PSTN side. And here we will have a calling party. So this call proceed means the called party is trying to inform us that the call is in progress, trying to set up the call. Okay, it's trying to establish the call. So alerting means the called party, the PSTN side. It can be a mobile phone, landline phone at the PSTN side, which is started. It has started to ring. It's ringing now, and that's where we hear a ring back tone in our at our side. So it's just similar to a mobile call. When you make a call to other mobile phone, whenever the called party, the other mobile phone start to ring, you will hear a ring back tone. So in PRI, that message is that tone. The ring back tone is indicated by the call alerting message. And when the called party accepts the call, it sends a connect message to the calling party that the called party has accepted the call. So this is a simple PRI call flow. It's very easy to understand. The debugs are very easy to analyze. Okay. So in case of PRI, the most famous and important debug that we collect for troubleshooting a call routing issue. So remember this, our layer 1 and layer 2 is already up and is in good state. Layer 1 is an active state, layer 2 is multiple frames established. So we won't be collecting layer 2 debugs. We won't be collecting debug ISDN Q921. We will be only collecting for call routing issues or checking the signaling debug ISDN Q931. Debug ISDN Q931. This is the most important and famous debug, and it's very easy to understand. Okay, so we'll be seeing a sample debug that I have along with MGCP and H323 protocol debugs, but we will be only focusing on PRI debugs as of now. So remember this, it's debug ISDN Q931. This is the command that you have to run and then make a test call. And then after making the test call, if issue is reproduced, you can collect the logs in the router's buffer. So you can do a show log after that and collect the logs. Okay, just copy paste the logs in the notepad++ file, or you can do a terminal monitor. You can enable the terminal monitor using the command termmon. You can use it. So when you enable the terminal monitor, it will show you the logs or the debugs collected for the call in a real time. It will keep on popping up. The debugs will keep on popping up on the router screen on the router screen. But show log will show you the outputs after you enable the debugs, collect the make the test call, reproduce the issue. You can do a show log and collect all the logs at once. I prefer show log, not terminal monitor. So I have a sample debug here. I'll also show you how to analyze this sample debug in Notepad++ file. Few things to show you here is, so this is a setup message that we are receiving. The things to understand is, how will you understand if the setup message is coming or going out of the router? So there are two things that can be checked. RX is receive. That means you are receiving this setup message. That means it's an incoming call. The call is coming from PSTN to our infrastructure, and you'll be also able to see this arrow direction. It's an incoming arrow. This arrow, it's an incoming arrow. That means it's an incoming setup from provider to the router. Remember one thing, when we collect the debugs, the message that are printed by the router is in perspective of the router itself. If it's receiving a message, it will show you as receiving. If it's sending a message, it will show you as transmitted or maybe sending the message. Okay, so this setup is being received by the router. That means it's an incoming call. So can be checked by this RX, which means receive, and the arrow direction, which is an incoming arrow direction. So this will make you understand if the setup is coming or any ISDN message is coming or going out of the router. Call reference. This is the important thing. The last three characters of call reference are the unique identifier for a particular call. So before you start analyzing a debug, the things that you have, the information that you should have is call the number, calling number, These are the messages that you should have: the calling number and the called party number, time of the call, obviously, if there are a lot of calls going on. Once you have the calling call number, and if you are able to find this setup message, mark the last three characters of a call reference. Mark the last three characters of call reference. This is important and unique identifier for a particular PRI call. So this is the incoming setup. That means after that, our router will be sending or transmitting a call proceeding to the provider. Yes, we are transmitting TX, and if you see the arrow direction, it's going out. Call proceeding, you will have the name of the message and the same last three characters. Again, after we send the call proceeding informing the calling party that the call is in progress, as soon as the called party started to ring, we will send a alerting message. If you see the same call reference, a transmit message with outgoing direction arrow, and name of the message is alerting. So the called party has now started to ring, and we are intimating this to the calling party, the provider side, because it's an incoming call. So the call is coming from the provider side, with an alerting message that the called party has now started to ring, and at the same time, the calling party will hear a ring back tone. Okay. After alerting, as soon as the called party accepts the call, will transmit a connect message, same call reference ID. If you see, transmitting outgoing direction. Name of the message is connect. That means the called party, which can be a IP phone. If it's an incoming call, the IP phone would be a called party. In case of a simple call flow, the IP phone has accepted the call, and and the IP phone is now off hook. So this is the connect message, and we will be receiving a connect ACK from the provider side. So receiving, you see it's an RX receiving, and the arrow message is its incoming direction. So remember, this is a PRI. PRI is connected between the gateway, a voice gateway, and the provider. So the exchange of messages will happen only between the Cisco voice gateway and the provider. So if a message is coming, that means it's coming from provider. If message is going out, it means the message is going out to the provider. So the call, it's very important to understand the call flow. Okay. So PRI is a connectivity between voice gateway and provider. So message exchanges or signaling will take place between voice gateway and provider. Okay. So this is a sample debug analysis. And now let me show you the same debugs in a Notepad++ file. I'll show you how to analyze them in a Notepad++ file. So I have a sample debug. This sample debug output file contains the debug of PRI and MGCP debugs as well, but we won't be focusing on MGCP debugs as of now. We'll see MGCP, we'll learn about MGCP in the future videos. As of now, we'll just focus on PRI debugs. Okay, so if you see the same type of debugs we have here, this is my called party number. So always mark called and calling party number. This is my calling party number. So as I mentioned earlier, you should have this information available with you. The calling call party number, time of the call, all this information should be with you before you start analyzing a debug. Once you get the calling call party details and time of the call, you have to find the setup message using the calling or the called party. You can do Control F and find, and just check whether that call happened at the same time when at the time that you have. So suppose the call happened at this 12:14 time. Okay, it can be a 12:14 a.m. or p.m. Not sure what time zone it was collected. So this information should be with you. Now mark the last three characters of the call reference, which is the unique ID. If you see, this setup is coming, we are receiving this setup. RX receiving the setup from the provider. That means it's an incoming call. So as soon as you mark the last three characters of a call reference, okay, and if it's a small sample output or small debug output, we'll be able to see the same highlighted characters in further messages. So if you scroll down, so after setup message is received by the router, what should happen? Our router should respond, the Cisco voice router should respond to the provider with a call proceeding under the same call reference. So if you scroll down, you'll be able to see that yes, we are transmitting a call proceeding message to the provider under the same call reference. We are also transmitting an alerting message to the provider under the same call reference. And we are also transmitting a connect message to the provider under the same call reference. That means now the called party has accepted the call and it's ready to connect, ready to start two-way audio transmission. And we are receiving a connect ACK under the same call reference from the provider. We are receiving it. If you see, it's RX under the same call reference. The arrow direction is an incoming arrow direction. So this is how we analyze ISDN PRI debug. Let's see if we have a disconnect as well. And yes, so we have a disconnect as well under the same call reference. And this disconnect is a transmit message. That means the router is sending this disconnect to the provider. Okay, so as router has initiated the disconnect, that means as it was an incoming call, so the call was disconnected by the IP phone because the calling party was provider, because it was an incoming call, and called party was the IP phone. So the called party has initiated the disconnect, and that's why we are sending the disconnect under the same call reference to the provider. And will be receiving a release from provider under the same call reference. So this is how we analyze ISDN Q931 debugs. Okay, remember to gather all the information: calling, call party, time of the call. Remember to mark last three characters of a call reference. Remember the call flow as well. For incoming and outgoing call, the message direction changes. If it's an incoming call, we will be receiving a setup. If it's an outgoing call, we will be sending out the setup to the provider. Okay, and rest of the messages as I have discussed. So it's very easy. PRI debugs are very easy to understand and easy to analyze. Remember these messages. A short way to remember these messages is PACD. This is a short way if you want to remember the messages. It can be understood. SPACD: setup, proceeding, alert, connect, disconnect. So you can use this as a full form, SPACD. So this is all about today's video, guys. Hope you understood and learned something out of this video. Do subscribe to my channel, comment, like, and share my videos. I'm sure someone will get help from these videos. Till then, everyone keep safe, take care, and bye bye.